Good morning. Day 45, Wednesday, the 6th day of May, 2020. I'm Vincent Russo of the Russo Law Group, and I have a special guest today, my son, Robert Russo, who is a Broadway theater critic. Welcome, Robert.
Hi, Dad.
How are you doing in New York City these days?
I'm good. I'm just holed up in my apartment and making the best of it.
Okay, being safe.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so lots of questions about Broadway.
Yeah.
When will it open?
Well, that's kind of the $64,000 question right now. As of today, May 6th, Broadway is closed until June 7th. But that's been a moving target based on federal, state, and city guidance, which has been changing, obviously, as this pandemic has unfolded. So I suspect that it will not be back on June 7th. I think I recently read an interview with Charlotte St. Martin, who is the president of the Broadway League, which is the trade association for the Broadway theater industry. And she suggested that the earliest would probably be September, and hinted that it might actually be later than that. It might be 2021. So it's sort of a moving target, and I imagine that live performance of any kind, along with sporting events, will probably be some of the last things to come back online, just given the number of people who congregate. But just to give a quick illustration of Broadway as an industry, because you might be sitting there thinking like, oh, who cares, right? It's somewhat frivolous. People can see entertainment when it's back,
No,
which
we
is true.
care. We care.
We care, though. We care. Well, because, Broadway is a billion-dollar industry. Last year, there were $2 billion in tickets sold, and 35% of those tickets are local, but 65% are from tourists. So it's really, it's like sort of the number one tourist attraction right here in New York City and for the area. And that $2 billion in ticket sales trickles out to be, at least for the last season on record, $14.7 billion of economic impact for the city,
Wow.
right? So that's restaurants and hotels and souvenir shops and parking and all the ancillary businesses that are supported by people going to the theater. So it is a pretty big deal. It's responsible for around 97,000 jobs, and upwards of $575 million of tax revenue.
Wow.
So, when Broadway's not up, it actually does trickle out to be
Right.
real.
But I think it's going to be really difficult with the theaters, the way everybody sits so close and gets packed in, especially the bathrooms in the theaters, how they're going to work it out so everybody's safe. But that's going to be a real challenge.
Yeah, it's really hard to practice social distancing in a theater that was built, in 1913, right? Like all the theaters are for the most part, most of them are really old. And beyond Broadway, obviously there are hundreds of theaters in New York City and all five boroughs, but also on Long Island, of varying sizes. And perhaps there'll be some sort of phased in reopening of things based on theater size. But much like like running a restaurant, you can't really operate a theater at 50% capacity because that doesn't bring in enough income to cover the operating costs, right? So you can open a restaurant at 50%, but you're not going to make enough money to cover the costs. Same thing with the theater.
So, Robert, you kind of have gone cold turkey.
Yes.
From writing your reviews on stageleft.nyc and your podcast. So how are you staying connected?
Yeah, well, it's actually kind of funny. I feel like I've been almost inundated with things that I can stream and screen on my own time. Almost every nonprofit theater company in the city and all the cultural institutions have been creating ways for artists and audiences to still engage in this rather strange time. So there's all sorts of things that that I've been checking out online. They're not a substitute for being there in person, but a nice facsimile of the experience. And then, I have my podcast. So in addition to my site, Stage Left, where I write about shows, I'm on a bit of a hiatus from that right now. But I have two podcasts, Stage Left, the podcast, which is, a conversation about shows. And then The Fabulous Invalid, which is named after a play from 1938. The title meant to evoke Broadway itself, which is always deemed on the verge of decline, yet always coming back, much like what we're experiencing right now. So it's sort of an apt title. And that show is interview based. So we have a different personality or topic each week, and we've kept that going through the pandemic.
Okay, and I'm sure that's very helpful to those lovers of Broadway to feel they're also connected with those interviews that you're doing. All
Exactly.
right, so we've got to work in the Beatles.
Okay, of course, always.
So in 1963, the Beatles recorded a song which actually came from a Broadway musical.
That's
So
right.
Robert, the name of the song and the show?
It's Till There Was You from The Music Man.
Okay, now I've got a part two.
Oh, okay.
Who wrote the song?
Very good question. Meredith Willson wrote.
You are right.
Yeah, wrote the song. Meredith Willson, I think, only wrote two musicals: The Music Man, which was a huge hit, and then The Unsinkable Molly Brown, which was somewhat of a flop.
So that was in 1957. Now,
Right.
also there was a movie version in 1962. Who sung the song?
Was it Shirley Jones?
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
Shirley Jones.
Shirley Jones. Yeah.
All right. So I can't thank you enough for coming on. We've got to get you back for an update over the next couple of weeks.